Again, thank you very much for staying until the very end. Hopefully this was a great conference for you all, and hopefully we all share in thank you very much for coming. Okay, and just as a reminder, this is the last final keynote badge. We'll be announcing the winner of the scavenger hunt at the very end of this session. There's I think that's the Amazon Echo right in Heather's, in front of Heather. So we'll be we'll be announcing the winner at the end. So did everybody scan it? I can move on? Great. All right, so for those of you who've been at the Kuroga conference in the past, you know that I sometimes bring my kids into these presentations to sort of highlight the class of 2036 or 2037. So I'm going to do a little bit of that today, but I'm also going to talk about and actually take you guys into a journey, not unlike what Eric was doing yesterday, but actually this time to another country. So I'm going to basically start off by, actually before we do that, I also want to make sure that you guys are aware of the survey results that we conducted at the beginning of this conference. So if you recall, the question was, 5 years from now, please rank order the impact of these technologies in higher education. 62 of you have responded, and this is actually the outcome of that survey. The number one by far was cybersecurity. So actually Phil Long, I was speaking to him a little earlier before he left. He was actually a little surprised that that was your number one, but nonetheless it's obviously an important topic. Of course, AI, machine learning, voice, VR, AR, all of those things are equally, I would say, important in many cases. We actually had a voice and VR and AR tie for third place until two of you broke the tie last night. So thank you for doing that. And of course, there are many other things that we can certainly talk about. But before we go into those future of technology, I wanted to just share with you what your potential class of 2036 might be doing at this particular moment. Now, this is my 2-year-old son, technically 2 years and now 5 months. And let me see if I can play this video.
Solar system. Solar system. Solar system.
Okay, so that's so he has a 4-year-old brother who's been using the iPad, and of course neither of them know how to type. But for some reason he's into solar systems, and by the way, this is the YouTube Kids application, which we deleted because there's so many commercials and other things like that. But at the time when they had the YouTube Kids, that's how he found solar system. Obviously he didn't know how to enunciate it properly and so on. But again, the kids are going to be on your campus, and this is where the voice comes in as well. Now, for the record, we did not turn on Amazon Echo or anything like that, because I think the little kids have a tendency to try crazy things with their voice commands. But at some point, when they are a little bit more mature, we'll certainly do that. So I took my family about 4 months ago, I would say now, to this country. So quick geography quiz. Does anybody know what this shape in blue represents? It's a country in Asia.
South Korea.
Okay, you're correct. Now the next question is, what is that shape in red that represents a United States state? All right, that's also correct. So South Korea is actually about the size of Indiana. And you may have seen some of the recent news. How many of you saw the CNN coverage or Fox News coverage in the last couple nights? Okay, so there was a historic moment, certainly, and hopefully everything will work out. But it was really, for me, I was born and raised in South Korea. I actually grew up in Gangnam district. That's the reason why I was playing that music earlier. It was actually one of those situations where, we were concerned about traveling, especially with two little kids, right? So if anything happens. But during the Olympics, of course, it seemed a lot safer, so we did that. And so a little bit about South Korea. Along with Sweden, apparently it's ranked #1 in the world for the most innovative countries. So do we still have the University of Karolinska folks here? Oh, there you are. Okay, so apparently Sweden and South Korea is tied at #1, 2 years in a row. Now the US, to my surprise, was not on this list. And by the way, if you're interested, you can actually Google Bloomberg, and this is sort of a survey there. And the reason why the U.S. didn't make it, for some reason, is the lack of STEM/engineering scientists graduating from the post-secondary education system. So I actually was really surprised, but again, that's what it is. So that's what South Korea is in terms of the ranking. Now, of course, they have historically ranked very high in terms of the internet speed, the penetration of all these new technologies. But it is a country that certainly prides itself in being, I would say, very high tech. So as you just saw, of course, Psy is a byproduct of that. Apparently this Gangnam Style just broke 3 billion views on YouTube, which is actually not the #1, but it's somewhere on the top, I would say top few. Interestingly enough, it actually beat, what is the title of it? Wheels on the Bus by Little Baby Bum, which has 2.1 billion YouTube views. So that actually surprised me a lot, and it's one of the favorites that my kids are playing these days. So Gangnam, by the way, is a district south of Han River in Seoul, Korea. Now, how many of you actually have been to Seoul? Okay, quite a few of you. And the way that South Korea and Seoul area actually grew is over the years, they've been building and raising the height of those buildings. So back when I was in high school, those buildings down here representing about 12 stories tall. So that was sort of a normal apartment building size. Today, now we're seeing 50, 60 stories tall, even higher in some cases, and they're popping up left and right. Seoul has approximately 25 million in its vicinity as a population, which unfortunately is also within an artillery range of the Korean border. So it has a lot of things. But anyway, it's actually overridden with technology. So everything from subways to high-speed internet, and all that stuff is obviously things that people take for granted. Now, I stayed at this time not at a normal hotel, but a sort of like an apartment complex. And one thing I noticed is that this is actually something very common now in South Korea. So at the entrance, you would have a panel like this, and then I can actually call the elevator from here. So before I leave, I can get the elevator to come up, and then I just walk in. So that might save me about 10 seconds, 20 seconds, depending on how high I'm up there. Of course, it also gives you the information about whether you have a package and other things like that. So the smart building and smart city and those things are obviously very prominent there. And in fact, in this particular apartment complex, as well as in many locations, when you drive into a parking garage or parking lot, you don't have to stop. You have to stop just a little bit so that the gate will open, but everything is automated. So again, saving you 10 seconds, maybe 20 seconds. You don't have to take out the ticket. You don't have to go and pay in advance and then do all that. It recognizes your license plate, and then basically everything is handled automatically. In fact, this is actually the culture of Pali-Pali, or P-A-L-I, Pali-Pali, which is actually quickly. So that's actually the expression that a lot of Koreans use, and that might explain the reason why they've been actually advancing a lot in terms of the technology, because they really care about speed. So speaking of speed, this is their high-speed train they set up for the Pyeongchang Olympics. So from Seoul to Pyeongchang, It could actually travel up to about 220 miles per hour, but of course the speed was regulated to about 150. But high-speed train, they can take the attendees or the audiences from Seoul City to Pyeongchang Olympics. And so that's actually the train that we were riding on. Now, at the Pyeongchang Olympics, and I had to cover those faces because obviously I didn't get the permissions from those ladies to have their pictures on this at this conference. But one of the notable things in Korea is actually not only are they welcoming these so spectators or visitors to the Olympics with real human beings, but they were very much into robotics. So robots are essentially welcoming people. Now, this I couldn't. I actually didn't take a picture at the Pyeongchang Olympics, but so I actually found a picture from Joseon.com, which happens to be an investor in Moto. But anyway, so they actually have this picture out there, so highlighting how at the Incheon International Airport, now you got robots on the left cleaning, and on the right providing concierge and information services. So it was a trial, and I don't know if it's still operational, but this was a controversial thing in the sense that it impacted jobs. So the functionalities that these robots were supposed to perform that included janitorial tasks, information assistance, translation, security, they were contract jobs at the airport, and those are actual numbers from 2016. So that was actually one of those things that sort of caught the attention of the newly elected president. So when he got elected, basically these robots were gone. So my understanding is that they're not really doing that in deployment. But imagine in your campuses at some point that you could have informational robots like this to greet the prospective students and parents, to provide assistance where needed. So I don't think it's too far ahead in the future. But of course, there are other consequences you have to think about, in terms of what that means to the campus. Now, does anybody recognize this picture? Okay, so we got two hands going up. This is the moment that this picture was taken. Actually, this was a TV broadcast at the time. This was AlphaGo versus Lee Sedol. And so for those of you who are not familiar, I highly encourage you to watch. There's a movie now on Netflix, I think. It's called AlphaGo. So Go is an ancient Chinese game. Koreans call it Paduk. And it is many times more difficult than chess. So a long time ago, IBM, of course, came up with their, what was it, Blue something? Deep Blue, thank you. That actually beat the world chess champion at the time. But it took until 2017 for an AI to basically compete against the world-class champion who is actually sitting on the other side. And luckily, well, actually I shouldn't say luckily, at the very beginning nobody knew what was going to happen. But he was losing 3-0, so it was a total of 5 games. So he lost first 3 games. And finally he was beating AlphaGo at the end. So I think that's probably going to be the last time that any human being is going to beat a AI-driven program, especially in this particular game. So the game is already over, whether it's recognizing speech, recognizing images. I think the world is certainly turning very quickly, where the AI is certainly going to play the role. And the Koreans certainly was shocked last year when this actually happened. Now, they're also very much concerned about cybersecurity. Now, Koreans have that particular neighbor to the north. They try to hack the systems for banking and everything else, I'm sure every day. They have a dedicated team, of course. So they're very conscious of that. But they're also into cybersecurity in other ways. So Bitcoins, of course, is another very popular item. And apparently, a couple of days ago, a South Korean Bitcoin exchange was hacked. And that actually cost $42 billion in loss. So it is a serious problem in South Korea, but of course it will impact the global Bitcoin market. Now, how many of you actually have Bitcoins? Okay. So yeah, so obviously it's it's another trend with the blockchain and all, but there's a lot of hype around this, but certainly this is real when it comes to dollars and cents. So the last thing I want to talk about from Korea is actually about 5G. So okay, so let me just have a quick show of hands. So how many of you actually have, let's see, let me just back up this way. So now I'm not going to do that right now. So let's see, 5G, I'm sure everybody knows, is the next generation wireless. Now 4G is what we are using today. So LTE is basically the standard. And in fact, we're trying to download, what was it, 100 megabyte file off of the Wi-Fi here. And because it was very saturated, we actually had to turn on the LTE. It was okay in terms of the speed, and so that was fine. But with 5G, now you can do that 10 times faster or 40 times faster. And just like when we went through this 3G to 4G, this is definitely coming. It's just a question of how. And 100 to 1,000 times in capacity. So that means that many devices can now connect to it, which of course could include IoT and other devices. And it promises to be much lower in latency, which means, again, things are faster and faster and faster. So, of course, phones at some point, IoT, autonomous cars, and other things like that. And when I say coming soon, because in South Korea, they were trying this out in the area where the Pyeongchang Olympics was happening. I think, again, it was a lot of marketing hype. They had these use cases of virtual reality simulations and these drones flying around allegedly on 5G and all that stuff. But the technical standards have yet to be firmed up, so we will see. I think in the US, Verizon, AT&T, and a few others will be announcing this. But when the time comes, this will fundamentally change how people interact with mobile devices. And not just downloading files, but other things like that. Now, it's not clear yet exactly how, but it will certainly have that impact. More importantly, for your campuses, you might have to think about putting up 5G infrastructure. So it actually operates at a much higher frequency, which means that it's not going to penetrate the buildings as well. And also it's a much shorter distance. That means lots of microcells and stuff like that. But again, this is definitely coming, most likely in 2 years or 3 years, if not sooner, in certain areas. So South Korea was great, and I really enjoyed it. But of course, I was there partially for the Olympics, right? So I downloaded this app. It's the official Pyeongchang Olympics app. I opened it, and it's good. So I got the news about what's happening. And then I tried to get, when I was on site around the Olympics, I tried to get transportation information. I assumed, since they got 5G and everything else, the buses would be automatically tracked, like what we do here in the US. But none of that actually happened. And in fact, I looked up on the Google App Store for the iOS, 1 star. And there are obviously people who are complaining about confusing to it will not accept registration. So bad experience. And all I'm saying is, you got great technology, just get it done right. And certainly we, as the representatives that are working with and for higher education, have this duty to make sure that the user experience it doesn't suck, right? So that's something that I want to sort of iterate. Now, one more thing I want to mention about my trip. On the way back, and this is actually something that recently became like super useful for me, especially going to and from the airport in Boston. How many of you have been to Boston's Logan Airport? Okay, great. So if you, in the past, a few months ago, when you are using Waze app and you are driving in the tunnel, it wouldn't track your location properly. In fact, it would give you something like that. So even if I'm in the middle of the tunnel, it will think that I'm outside the tunnel or at the entrance. And that's actually Apple Maps, this is Google Maps, and the one on the left is Waze. So approximately 1 minute time difference in terms of the screenshots. But that basically tells you the magic that happened was beacons. So they installed beacons, and at this point, hopefully it will change for other apps at some point. So this is actually, again, the power of technology that helps people navigate. And that's especially useful for people who are new to Boston, right? So once you get into the tunnel, you have no idea which is the exit and all that stuff, and it's really confusing. But this hopefully will save a lot of hassle and time for regular consumers. So we are definitely not falling behind countries like South Korea for sure. It's just how do we leverage this technology. So before I now go into the next segment of my presentation, I wanted to just share with you a few quotes. So the thing about technology, I think yesterday's speaker mentioned that it's really not about technology, right? It's about you, it's about the organization, it's about people who are actually bringing the solutions to it. And Steve Jobs was asked this question about a particular technology, and he answered as such. You've got to start with the customer experience and work back toward the technology. Now, the context of this particular question was something about Java a long time ago, but this sort of resonates in many ways that we should really be thinking about the solutions and the customer experience or student success prior to really thinking about the technology. Another quote that I want to share is from Bill Gates. Your most unhappy customers are your greatest source of learning. Now, that applies to you, and that applies to us as well. She assured me a couple years ago they had some very, various different issues with the platform, and I am very happy to report, hopefully, she will confirm if you would like, that most of what she actually, I would say all of them, have been resolved. But in fact, what the feedback that she provided to us at the time is what Matt Muirmore presented and what Pete presented in terms of our improving of the product. So I would say that this is actually a great source of learning for Motor Labs, and collectively as a whole, if you need help, let us know. If you see issues, let us know. If you need new features, let us know, and we can work together to solve that. So Emerson College actually won an award last night, and the way that they, so long story short, I was at a conference, and the associate CIO of Emerson College walks up to me and then said, we have no idea why we even have a mobile app, because they haven't updated it for a long time. I'm happy to report that after many months now, they engaged students, and they are the ones who created the new app, and they are continuously working with those students. So it wasn't much of a technology issue, it was how to be successful. And again, we're happy to report that they came up with a really good updated version of that. Then the last quote is about being really focused, Jeff Bezos. So from all of you who are working with various different parts of the universities, really serving the students, serving other departments, we should treat them as customers. We should make sure that their experience is awesome. Not just the app, but the interactions and everything else. And so hopefully all of these learnings that we have will help you to be more successful and help make those students more successful in the future. Now, there was a time in the past when we would talk about mobile adoption, penetration, all that stuff. As you've seen, this is actually a slide from UCF. 99.62% of students at UCF has smartphone. And I think the statistics for Indiana State is about 98 point something. So we no longer have to talk about that, right? So those days are over. It's granted that everybody has smartphones. And in fact, now it's a question of whether it's the wearables or other things like that that might be more important down the road. We'll see. But the other notable thing, and this actually caught me a little bit off guard, it was a pleasant surprise. And this is actually publicly available data from the University of Notre Dame, comparing the traffic to their nd.edu website to what's phrased here as nd.edu. That's sort of the leftover legacy naming convention, but that's their native app. So up until 2017, the traffic or the page views, if you will, have been going up for the mobile app, and it's been going down for the web, which is responsive, of course. So I thought that was interesting, and then there was a commentary that it's worth noting that in 2017, both curves begin to flatten. So I looked at April 2018, nd.edu, 485,000 views by 167,000 people. or I guess users. And the mobile app, about 3,000 less, actually not even 3,000. And used by 15,405 people. Now, what's the population of Notre Dame again? Is it 12,000 students-ish? Yeah, so this is actually amazing that mobile app that represents the university now is almost on par with the website that everybody would Google. So I think currently this is the outlier. The only reason why we are aware of it is because this article was published. But I would encourage you to also go back and see if this is possible for you. And I am fairly confident that if you do what they did, and we can also improve on other things like that, but we can make it happen where these adoption of not just the device, but of course the app, and the use of those apps will continue to go up. Now, so we actually have a sort of a standard slide to sort of talk about that. And when you begin, of course, you have a bunch of modules, and then you sort of make the improvements and add new features and so on. So whether it's adding beacons for indoor navigation or proximity-based alerts, or even creating custom modules using X modules. So those are all the things that we can do. So as long as we can have this bigger frame of mind, where we are really helping students be successful, and adding these features when and where appropriate and necessary, just like what the University of Notre Dame had done, I think the sort of a way for a successful outcome will be there for all of us. Now, so the other topic that I recently came to my attention in a very important way. Now, is Indiana State here? So they came to us, and of course they presented this week. Their graduation rate is about 33%. They have actually increased their enrollment, and basically a lot more students are enrolling every year, and that was awesome. But it's not just Indiana State. In the U.S., on average, less than 40% of college students graduate in 4 years. And so that actually was very interesting. And what can we do about that? And again, that was the statistics from Indiana State. How do you make sure that the freshmen come back as sophomores? And then once they are coming back, the conversion rate from that point on looks much better, but definitely that's the challenge. So how do we solve that problem together? And by the way, I just took a very quick the spread of the institutions represented in this year's conference, and there it is. So to be fair, we started with many of the top universities in the country. We never thought about graduation rate. We never thought about retention rate, but we hear you loud and clear that there are schools with 40%, 50%, 60% that needs to go up, or even down below the average. So again, collectively, I think we can come up with various different solutions, just like what we did with Starter Kit. Maybe we can work on a Starter Kit for student success, or other things that we can easily do, very low-hanging fruits that can help universities adapt to certain solutions. But then the schools without that problem might have a different set of problems. So I was actually at MIT a few weeks ago, actually maybe 2-3 weeks ago. Walked into the men's bathroom on the top floor of the media lab. In the men's bathroom stall in front of the urinal, every single urinal had that particular poster. It's about Title IX. Apparently it was important for that particular building, because I haven't checked the other bathrooms, but it's an issue, right? Now, Harvard also talked about that, and Title IX led them to come up with a UI that really is designed to make that help be more accessible. And so again, some of these are more top-down approaches, but certainly it's an important issue. I probably have most of our customers' apps on my phone, and I do have push notifications turned on. And it is very disturbing. It's actually depressing to get notifications about incidents that are happening at Stanford, incidents that are happening at William and Mary or in some of these other both top-tier institutions as well as the ones that are at-risk type of places. So it is actually something that's very important for all of us to really think about it. It may not be your number one priority or even number 2 or 3, but we should really think about and how to incorporate that type of experience into the app. So that brings us to a lot of great examples that of course we've seen, especially last night. And so when we looked at the Academy Award winners, and it sort of represented some of the best of the breed. We actually wish that there were more categories, and maybe we'll work on that next year. But Colgate, for example, has been a customer with us for many years. They're using this not just for the admissions, but they just did the reunion. So it was great to see how they are using the same technology for multiple, not just events, but also personas and other things like that. So we can all learn from that if we haven't done so already. University of Cincinnati, this is a separate app. If you go to the App Store and search for, I guess, University of Cincinnati, although that'll be very hard to type, you will actually see that this is a separate app. They did this intentionally, I think, to again highlight certain types of topics that are important to the institution. Again, very well done by them. But of course, they have their main app. So people ask me all the time, well, how come this school has like all these different apps, and how come other schools have a single consolidated app? My typical answer is there's no right answer. It's really up to you. And I'll continue to say that. But I think it's really important for you to sort of consider, and what your customers also want inside the university is obviously important. But of course, my favorite is having everything, like in Notre Dame's case, inside the same app, so that you can promote the same thing and increase the traffic as you just saw. St. Francis College. Again, awesome job. And this is actually, really working on that student engagement, and notice, happening now, advisement, and some of those key things that I'm assuming you guys actually worked with students. Is that correct? Okay, yeah, so this is actually the result of what they're doing. So again, very important from all of our perspective just to learn from that. Sacramento State, Jeff? Yeah, so I unfortunately missed your session yesterday, but I heard a lot of great things about it. Of course, the student who was in the student panel was tremendously helpful in sort of describing the vision for not just an app that's useful, but also that's perhaps compassionate. They have a certain number of homeless students, certain number of students who are struggling with dining and food, not because they ran out of money at the end of the year, perhaps, but just in general. So having the features and capabilities built into it, which is really important. Now, I think we had a free food mailing list at MIT. I think they still have it, but we kind of that was sort of like a joke type of thing. Oh yeah, you can get free food if you subscribe to this mailing list. This was a long time ago, and certainly, but here, this is a serious issue that we want to solve for. And so any of you in a similar situation certainly can learn from this experience as well. And Emerson, so I mentioned this earlier, but again, this is a situation where everybody, well, I guess the higher ups at Emerson thought, well, we're not really getting any traffic, nobody's using the app, so what's the value? And so by attending conferences like this, they learned. Not from us, but actually from the others. So thank you for all of you who have helped with your peers to learn from that. And then of course they really put it into action. They actually went back and hired students. They had them work on prototyping, just like many of our customers are doing today. And now, very happy, and we really look forward to what they're going to do in the future. And then, last but not least, UCF. So I really am impressed and constantly amazed at the work that UCF is really doing with the platform. Not just about the events, but also just thinking about various things with respect to new features. The parking, for example, I believe that was a sort of a solution that was created very quickly with an iframe. I would encourage you to think about things that can be done sooner than later. And so I won't name the customer's name. It's actually not from higher ed. But we have a customer who has been working on this parking integration with, sensors and real-time data from that. There was a very easy solution that could have been implemented in 5 minutes, literally 5 minutes. But they wanted to do the hard thing, and then now it's almost in production, but it took many, many weeks and I would say a couple months. Now the senior leadership was like, what's going on? I mean, where's the solution? Well, we gave them options. There was this 5-minute option. So in hindsight, they should have chosen the 5-minute option to get something up and running now, and then work on the other one and get it to the production when that's ready. But lessons like this really, let's think about those lower hanging fruits that can really solve the pain points of students today, as opposed to coming up with this perfect solution that might take many weeks and months. And I understand that everybody liked the X module and X component session. How many of you actually have been to that session? All right. So hopefully you guys can really take advantage now of this way of creating custom modules or custom components inside the app using web services and APIs. And this really was designed to help all of us, right? So in the past, it was difficult for us to sort of maintain a custom developed modules and things like that. But this really helps us to scale. But the other thing is that as we are now moving to other areas besides mobile, namely desktop, it's actually something that's very timely for those of you who are taking advantage of our desktop portal as well. So speaking of that, we have been and we will always be a mobile-first company. But many of our customers are now coming to us with a slightly different challenge. Their challenge, which many of them already implemented, as you can see, is to talk about digital and not mobile. So mobile is already something that people take for granted. If they don't have a good mobile solution today, they need it now. But they also want to take advantage of the same platform that's powering their mobile apps to also help them with desktop portals. So here are some couple of examples, MyVisD, and then of course Portland State, who spoke a little earlier, is certainly doing similar things. So we expect probably by next year's conference a lot more universities. Now, how many of you are actually currently licensed or using desktop actively? Okay, perfect. Now, of course, you may have figured this out already, but our Kurogo Conference app also has a desktop view. Right, so we are, I guess for the lack of a better word, eating our own dog food, or what's the other expression? Right, drinking our own champagne. This is definitely something that we are also using to power our own events as well as other applications, and we will definitely be making more investment into this area. So I'm almost done with my presentation, but I thought there were so many talks this week that was awesome, exciting, educational, inspirational, and so on. One thing that sort of caught my attention was Harvard. And I know that many of you have been wondering, how come they have so many different apps? Well, it is Harvard, and it is a very decentralized organization. But of course, Moto is actively working with pretty much all of them, which is great. But that's certainly a challenge. But one thing that I really find encouraging is that they now are engaged with their students. In the past, it was more of a top-down, hey, we want this app, so let's get it up and running. And after that, they don't really do much. But they are really talking to not just the students, but to everyone else. The triggering point for them was the Title IX. So the President's office basically thought, we need a Title IX app. Well, what you gonna put in there? Well, what happens if something bad happens and you can actually get help here and there. But they realized, of course, that's not enough of an app. Right? How many people are just going to download a safety, healthy, and wellness app and then keep it on their phone? The idea was to embed that into the app that the students will be using on a day-to-day basis. So that's what they're doing. But to do that, of course, it's not, because it's so decentralized, they need help. And of course, we have the technologies to help them, but they actually need to put that in place. So I'm really happy that they're doing this now. And for all of you who haven't done this already, but I know many of you have, so congratulations. Keep engaging, keep working, keep hiring. By the way, that's a very important thing, I would say. How many of you actually have hired student workers? Great. So I think about 40%. So the other 60% really need to think about that. Now, this, I would argue, is going to be awesome for you because not only does it get you more resources, they're relatively inexpensive, and it's a win-win-win for everybody. Now, of course, there may be some exceptions because I've dealt with them myself. It's not always, doesn't always work out, but at least keep trying and make it part of your program so that they can help you with everything from surveys to even prototyping or designing new features and things like that would be super duper. And Appathon. So I think somebody asked earlier about maybe a couple of days ago. So we don't, we tried the Appathon as a sort of a large-scale effort, but we, for the time being, haven't decided to do it again in terms of a large scale. However, if you are interested in doing that at your university, we'll be more than willing to support. So please let us know. We've already done this with, I think it was University of San Francisco. That was the most recent one. And a number of others as well. So the trick to this is that, of course, you have to be sort of running those events, but Modo can help you with sandboxes. We can help you with some training materials, so your students can get some training. And these students, by the way, will definitely be able to use our platform, so don't worry about that. And in fact, there was a thesis for the MIT article written about Modo Labs last year. Apps created for everyone by everyone. And it's really true. So I think many of you would attest to it, of course. And our goal is to really keep this up to make sure that not just, right now I think we have about 250 or so universities, but more like 1,000, maybe more, are super happy and make those students successful around the world. And so that's our goal. And actually, I unfortunately had to sort of cut off the picture, but you might recognize that Mr. Eric Kim is down there, and Sonia is way in the back. And of course, they are the members of the original MIT Mobile team. We also have Brian Pat, who's also from that original team, still with Modo Labs. And Pete's team in the back have recently grown to the point where I think it's larger than where the company was about 3-4 years ago. So we have a very robust engineering team that is going to be working and investing more into the technology. And of course you have Matt Wilmore, who's done a tremendous job for the University of Notre Dame, but now he's with Modo Labs. And more importantly, I think he felt all the pains of our customers and is translating it into the product roadmap. So I think that's really going to be an awesome thing moving forward as well. And actually, Eric Gear, are you here? Yes, so Eric Gear, for those of you who are new to Modo or maybe relatively new, is in charge now of customer success. And he also has Michelle and other team members at Modo Labs working to help you, whatever your needs might be. So please don't be shy, reach out. And we are here to help you make your students more successful. So, in conclusion, we are the future of mobile in higher ed. And in the past, I really would focus more on the increase of bandwidth and the processing speed and AR and VR and all kinds of indoor navigation. So those technologies certainly are already here in many ways. And quite frankly, I think 4G is fast enough. for the most applications, although I might change my mind in 2 years. And the way that we are really thinking about this isn't so much about whether there's this coolest technology here that we can embed just for the hype, sake of hype, but rather technologies that can really be useful, that works 90%, 95, 99% of the time, that really helps students be successful. So hopefully you can continue to join us in this journey. So that was it. So thank you, and I also want to thank the sponsors, of course, AWS, Density, Gray Heller, and Mist. You have heard from all of them. So please, reach out to them. Also ask us about questions about these different vendors. Now we have a lot more partners, of course. But they couldn't make it to this year's conference. If you also think about any particular vendor that you might be interested in having Moto Labs having an official partnership with, also please feel free to reach out to us as well.